Hey, how's it going, everyone? And on the in the spirit of flexible Thursdays and the fact that I'm going on a trip with my girlfriend this weekend, like I got some time today, so that's why we're live to talk about the Women's Rugby World Cup from my American perspective and where the game goes forward. I think we'll be on for about 20 minutes, like you and me. If it's just me, call it good. You can reach me on Twitter at the Strobro, and I'm also over at Earful of Dirt for the MLR podcast. So if you got questions about that, go over there. But let's talk about the Women's Rugby World Cup. I have to say, as a club player, I wasn't really in tune with women's rugby in 2014. And most of that had to do with my job at the time. I was definitely stuck in the desert a lot and didn't really pay attention to much international rugby outside of the random Men's Eagles tweet. But over the past year, with tons of different things going on, I've definitely gotten involved and started watching the Women's Eagles. And that's where I got super hyped about the Can-Am series. My girlfriend and I took a trip to go watch the Women's Eagles in San Diego. I watched the first match they played against Canada on Facebook Live, so I watched that entire series. Remember, scrambling to go drag out some game film from the 2-game series we played against France so that I could have an idea of what to expect and what was going on. So let's talk overarching about the Women's Rugby World Cup and what went down. So World Rugby claims that this was the most successful Women's Rugby World Cup ever. And I tend to agree with that. But let's get into the format. So the format was a 2-campus format in Dublin. Not really 2-campus. Like, you could walk to both games from where you were. So more like 2 different stadiums within walking distance. I didn't mind all of the games on the same day, but based on, if they keep 12 matches, you can start one early. If they keep 12 teams, you can start the pools early enough in the morning and go into the evening by, just not you don't need to have 2 games going on simultaneously. You want people at these games. I understood that things sold out, but because it was in the middle of the day during the work week on Tuesdays, usually, I think Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and there was games on Thursdays. So they were all like midweek games. It didn't really allow people to go to the early matches. And that's a big problem for me, especially with the way this was accepted in Ireland. And tons of people went to the weekend matches. Those things were really full, whereas during the week, things were a bit rougher. So I would say World Rugby, if you're going to keep the Women's Rugby World Cup at 12 teams for so that the women can be on the stage they've earned, because they've earned this by qualifying and going out there and doing what they get. Because guess what? 5 of these teams play in the Six Nations, and they all have big crowd draws. France draws, 13,000 women, 13,000 men and women to watch the France Feminines. The Red Roses draw over 10,000 during the Six Nations. So, I mean, they draw crowds. And if you watched the France matches, tons of people came over from France to root for Les Féminines. And then if you watch the USA matches, tons of people came over from the United States to watch the USA. And then tons of people came over to watch England from, England, and same with Wales. Really the far-flung countries are the ones that were struggling as far as getting people at. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, sell a game pass, but if you scheduled it in such a way that you didn't have matches going on simultaneously, it would be better for attendance. But then let's get into the format in regards to player welfare. 4 days between matches. There's an argument about it because, most of these are amateur players, so they have to get back to work at some point. Well, in the modern era, at least in the United States, with discretionary PTO, no employer is going to let you go. For discretionary PTO means you can sort of take as much time off as you need. Not necessarily as you want, but as you need. So in this case, you could get 6 weeks off because in the United States, no employer is going to cut you if you're representing the national team. Like they're going to that would just ruin them, socially completely. So if you're playing on the national team, whether it's men's or women's, you can take 6 weeks off. Heck, the men now that are amateur players take, almost 3 to 4 months off because of the way the ARC is and the way the tour is. And guess what? Their employers are okay with that. So why wouldn't the women's employers be okay with that? Why wouldn't the ladies' employers be okay with that? And I understand some women don't like being referred to as ladies, but some of the teams like being referred to as ladies. So ladies and women's employers, or in the case of some of these women that are on the U.S. team, like Tess Fury and I think Kayla Kennett, they're both at Penn State, and Penn State started up during this period of time. Tess Fury is a nursing student and wasn't originally, I think, called up specifically due to her commitment as a nursing student at Penn State. But the moment that decision was made, the action cycle took, and her professors worked with her because she's in her senior year, has to do clinicals and all sorts of stuff. So, we have tons of high performing women in our Eagles program. And if the men can get the time off, why can't the women? Of course they can. So I think that's a BS argument from World Rugby and from anyone who's trying to defend that idea. Player welfare. Let's just get into that. 4 days between matches isn't enough time to reset your entire body. So given a men's rugby schedule or an NFL schedule, you normally get 6 days in between. Mondays tend to be rehab and off, and Tuesdays tend to be light work, lots of film study, and you start building up through the end of the week based on like how NFL practices work. I know that Mondays in the Mitre 10 tend to be a lot of film, some light work, and Tuesdays they do a lot of recovery stuff. So like everyone has to be in the pool doing a recovery swim. So that's really cool. But with 4 days in between matches, like you get no chance. I mean, some of these matches were 4 days and 5 days apart. So the 3 days in between the match, so you have to do all your rehab one day. You get 1 day of practice and then a captain's run. That's just not good. And, we had Danielle Waterman. She suffered a concussion. She was pulled out for a concussion and she wasn't able to go through HIA. I don't think she would have been cleared, and I wouldn't have cleared her because they said she came out for a concussion. But the way the current protocols allow, she could have gone through the week program and you would have at least known if there was availability. But with the short turnaround, there's with this current protocol that World Rugby is using, she couldn't even be tested to get for availability because I think she wasn't able to be tested until 2 days later. than the final. So that's a big issue right there. So you need 6 days in between matches so that you can do rehab, you can work everything out, you can do all your film study, and you can determine the fitness level of your squad, of like who you are, who your first 23 are. I mean, the way this format worked out is that World Rugby only allowed 28 players to travel rather than 36 from the previous World Cup, which left us at the same level as the men's U20 Junior World Championship. I mean, that's a no-go. Like, I mean, no. So I think the first thing we fix is, the length of the tournament and the time between matches. The second thing we fix is the qualifications process for both the men's and the women's World Cup. Right now, the men's World Cup allows like 12 auto qualifiers. That's a joke. The women's World Cup, I think it was 7 auto qualifiers. I'm not sure. Ireland would have qualified anyways, based on where they finished in the Six Nations and how many matches they've won. But as the host, they qualified. So I think that's a problem, because if you reformat the qualifications process for the Women's Rugby World Cup, you guarantee more test matches. And same thing with the men's Rugby World Cup as well. If you make everyone qualify, you force people to play more test matches. And then the other thing for me is these pools, by only having 12 teams doesn't work, because many people are saying, hey, we shouldn't have 120-0. And here's the reality is Hong Kong was the 24th ranked team in the world. And they went up against, the second ranked team in the world. That is the scoreline that should occur in rugby, the way it works. But then Hong Kong went out there after that and had a bunch of great matches as well. Like, they had heart, they had hustle, they had fundamentals, because they have a great coach. But everyone's screaming that we can't have this. Well, we have all these teams that either didn't participate in the qualifications process because they didn't believe in it, or there weren't spaces to qualify because of the current aggregate qualifying process. So, as I've learned from other sports, the more elite playing opportunities on the macro level as well as on the individual level will be more investment in the game. So I think that's the easiest next step, is to just say, hey, we need to expand to 16. And, I'm going to have some naysayers out there saying, hey, quality of women's rugby isn't there. The quality of women's rugby is there. Okay. The technical skills that I saw during this, and I'm sure this will be an unpopular opinion, was much better than the men's side. The men's side is all about, it's so much more physical, and so much, like, it's really, like, the collisions are there. But the ball handling and technical skills at the high level between, the Black Ferns, the France Feminines, the English, the Canadians, it was there. Like, you have very technically sound individuals playing this game. The United States, I would say we were less technically sound, but there's reasons for that. And the reasons I'll get into later on in the broadcast. So those are the big things I would shift. I think the next location is probably going to be France. I think the United States, USAR, needs to do a serious long look and bid for it. Like, contact AAG, contact IMG, talk to UWS, your partner in USA Sevens, and see, hey, what can we do for this? Because we need to host this. And I think whether it's, 2021 or 2025. I think more so 2025 because we should bid to like encompass around the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. So if we can get the 2025 Women's Rugby World Cup here, and then get the 2027 or 2031 Men's Rugby World Cup, so we sandwich the Olympics, that would be a great celebration of rugby in the United States, and the investment that will come in dollars will be tremendous, and it'll be awesome because we can do this right now. We have the facilities in this country to host, a 16-team Women's Rugby World Cup, a 24-team Men's Rugby World Cup. Not nearly as many countries are ready to go right now. If you look at how the Olympics were set up for 2024 and 2028, the IOC wasn't going to bid it as, I would say, like a make work project. They wanted a sustainable architectural plan. So the cities that wanted to come in here, you're looking at limited investment. What facilities do you have right now that can do this? And will those facilities be used again? Because if you look at all of the Olympics in the last, last 50 years, you have all these facilities that don't get used the next year. So that's a problem. So we can sustainably host a men's and women's rugby World Cup really tomorrow. But I think that would be a great celebration of the game. I haven't seen the NBC ratings for the match. I wasn't able to see the women's semifinals until the other day for the not women's semifinals, but women's third place match, USA versus France. I've watched it, and we can get into that later, but it's sort of a throw out the film type thing because it's the final. But I want to know what those ratings were, because the ratings for France, like, the reason why I'd send it there is the viewership is there. I know that the attendance wasn't at Marquis's, but I think you have to, if France bids for it, they need to carefully select the place that they go to, and they can easily probably double and maybe triple the attendance that Dublin and Belfast had. That's what I think. For the United States, I think we could host this in the Austin to Houston corridor, or the LA to San Diego corridor, based on if they want to do the single or double campus type setup, because there are facilities there ready to go. So going forward, as far as the play was concerned, man, the Black Ferns are they're the champions for a reason. When they played a bad game, they still won by like 40. If you look at the stats, they didn't play well against Canada, but when they play well, they force you to play poorly, which is what happened in the second half for the United States versus Black Ferns in the semifinal. And you just see, I wouldn't say they're better coached. I would say that overall they're better players, but there's a reason for that. We matched up well, especially in the back line. I think we have some physical development to do in the pack, and that can easily be fixed. But still, we saw a great celebration of American women's rugby. So getting into it, you look at the teams that they played. I thought we played really bad against France. I thought we played really bad, but then you look at the scoreline, and it's pretty close. The spread was 21 points, and we covered. So it's just intense. The final versus England and New Zealand, those were the two best teams in the world. You could tell the way they played and the way they hit. And it was just sort of interesting to see the game within the game in the second half. And then that game within the game in the second half was the deciding factor because of how close it was. And like I said, even when the Black Ferns are playing a bad game, they force you to play a very bad game, which is what they did to England. Like the amount of mental mistakes was like tremendous. So congrats to the Black Ferns because you played the physical game and the mental game just as hard. So there's a reason why they, won the World Cup. The issue I have with that and England, and there was an expose, which I'll find and link below, that I read that made me really mad for the Irish women. And the reason why was like, they're hosting the World Cup and there shouldn't be drama. Like, there shouldn't be drama in their buildup. Like, everything should be set. Like, they should be put their women's national team, since they're hosting the World Cup, they should be like the amount of money and their schedules should be set so that they're set up for success. And the Irish women's team were not set up for success. And then leading up to this World Cup, it was announced that the English women, their full-time contracts would not be renewed, which created a lot of drama. Supposedly the Red Roses team knew in April after the Six Nations. Supposedly some of the older women on the team knew that they weren't that there was a chance up front that the contracts were going to be cyclical, like that they would only have centralized contracts, one out of every 3 years so that they can build towards the World Cup, which I find pretty despicable. I think the RFU has enough money that they can have central contracts for women and men, and they're paying the men just a stupid amount of money, like per match, 22,000 pounds per match, and a full-time women's contract was 20,000 pounds. If that's not disgusting, I don't know what is. So how do you build on this success? Well, I think in England, you're going to see something that goes towards this, except the agreements I've seen for the Tyrrell's premiership look at a very short-sighted project there. I think the RFU wants the investors to manage the Tyrrell's premiership out of their hands, because based on what I've read, and someone from the RFU can come give me the error, but this is what was in your own article, is that you're only committing salary subsidizations for 3 years. And the reality of this is that you're starting up a league with 10 teams, and you're going to need 30 to 40 players full-time under contract at each of these teams. So the 800,000 that you're willing to subsidize needs to be there per each team for 10 years. And I couldn't tell if the 800,000 was there pounds is per club, or if that was across the league. If that's across the league, that's nothing. Like, that doesn't help anyone. But if that's per team, and then you a mandatory commitment for salary from the investors behind each club, that gets you into a livable wage for women playing rugby, and that's outstanding. That's outstanding. But that commitment needs to be there for 10 years because it's a building project. So that's my opinion. But I think if this league lasts for 3 years, or however, the intent I think is for it to last forever, for Aviva, and provided that they get to the point where they don't need RFU subsidization, the RFU needs to fully contract their top 30 women for 15s again. I think that they shouldn't have let the contracts go, but that's just me. Then we go to France. They're starting to professionalize the women's game. So I think you're going to see a lot of money go into the women's game, especially after their success in gaining market share of viewers. because they peaked in the semifinals against England, 3.4 million viewers. And that broadcast averaged 3.02. That's impressive. I think, for just in that country alone. And then you add the streams from the United States, and then you add the ITV in the UK and Ireland, and I think you probably get close to like 5 million total watching that match. That's amazing. So it requires the unions to make heavy investment in the women's game. We'll see how committed the RFU is to the women's game when it comes to 15s. I hope that that things get taken care of, and that the Red Roses are put where they're supposed to be, and that's at the top, because they're the most successful women's program in the RFU. Like they make less money, but they have the most hardware between the sevens programs and the men's program. Like who has more trophies? Women. That means their importance needs to be elevated. Whereas it sounds like they're not going to be elevated. Like they're just being treated poorly. So we go to France. Like I said, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of investment there. The top four of countries, I think I don't know if New Zealand is in the top four, especially after basically what Steve Two said the other day. It sounded like their women didn't even get a stipend for the World Cup because they talked about how sustaining their contracts full time just isn't there, which I sort of understand, but I'm hearing a lot of I can'ts or we can'ts rather than we're working on it. I think the New Zealand Rugby Union has the money to easily sustain centralized contracts for their top 30 players in the Black Fern system. It sounded like that they're just going to do sort of what England did and refocus all their resources on sevens until, we're a year out, which is a problem, I think. So then the second most resources apparently devoted to women's rugby. So if we're ranking this, it's England won this last year. The second most resources was Wales. Just wild. So I think Wales, based on everything I've read, Wales is looking to throw even more resources. They didn't talk about central contracts, but funding for more camps and everything into the Welsh women's program. So that's really cool. But looking back, and you look at the United States, where are we going from here? Well, apparently we're looking for a new coach, Pete Steinberg. I know if you watch any of the previews I did, I was very critical of your in-game selections, but that's just me playing a critical eye. Your coaching was high quality. I mean, you've done great work for our women's program. I think for us in the United States that we've peaked. Coaching, better coaching. If you could say that we need better coaching, I don't think it gets us anywhere. Athletically, we match up really well with pretty much any team that we faced in this World Cup. The issue we have problems with is funding. We need to fund, and that's us as members of the union, whether male, female, what have you. We need to hold the people accountable so that they get, so that the women's Eagles get what they've earned. And, well, just stating, they're 40% of the game in the United States. So if their high performance budget is not even 10% of the men's, that's a problem. And that means the board and the union need to figure it out. And I'm not talking philanthropy. I'm talking about sponsorships that pay for things. Because right now the sevens program is not paid for through sponsorships. It's paid for through grants. And so is the men's 15s. It's paid for through grants. Like sponsorships should fund everything that we do. And then events should put revenue into our pockets. So we need to figure out the sponsorship deals so that we can fully fund the women's program. That means that they get a stipend every time they come in for assembly. That means the stipends for men's and women's and sevens and 15s goes up. That means the HSAAs and the junior All-Americans and the senior All-Americans programs are fully funded so that the players aren't paying to be there. Like, the junior All-Americans, because most of them are in college, yeah, you're not going to pay that. You can't really pay them a stipend, but you can make sure their food is covered and their housing is covered so that their parents aren't putting them in a hotel. That's your job. They're wearing the jersey. They're doing their job. So I think going forward, what puts us at like a competitive advantage, whereas we were at a competitive disadvantage. If you look at the last 3 years, in between the last World Cup and this World Cup, we only played 10 games. And I wouldn't say we cut players because we a lot of international players retired. Only 6 women from the last World Cup were on the squad. So we lost a lot of experience and brought in a lot of youth. And you can't, I would say, blood players, and you can't help get them experience if you only play 3.3 games a year. Like, it's just impossible for them to. There was a discussion I was a part of. It said like the premise was Eagles went with athleticism over IQ. It was a really bad discussion. I was pissed. But we didn't go with IQ over athleticism. We matched up athletically, and we went. I say we peaked because if we don't play the same amount of games and we don't assemble the same amount of times as the next best side does, so the Black Ferns had 8 tests in the 12 months leading up to the Rugby World Cup. We played more matches in this Women's Rugby World Cup than we played the entire year. Think about that. So we were peaking late. Like, we were peaking way late into the tournament. Whereas the Black Ferns, the Canadians, the English, the French, they're peaking early into the tournament because they played so many games, and then once they're on that peak, they're sustaining the summit. Whereas we just haven't played enough together and been together as like, here are the top 30 women in the Eagles program. They haven't been assembled enough to like really know each other beforehand. Like, there's just something about playing together on the field in which the chemistry just builds up over time, and we didn't have that opportunity, partially because World Rugby doesn't have mandated test windows, partially because the people at the union, they're on the struggle bus when it comes to, getting tests for both men and women so that we can develop our side. So if we double the amount of matches we play from, say, 3.3 to 6.3 to 6.6, so what that would look at like is like really in a non-World Cup year, we would play 6 matches. And in a World Cup year, we would play 8 before the World Cup. And we need to make the deals with whoever we need to make the deals with. So Hong Kong and Japan only really play each other. You didn't see the islands in the World Cup either. So we need to build a tournament that happens every year with, say, Hong Kong, Fiji, Japan, Samoa, or Tonga, 1 and 2, or all 3. Let's have a 17 tournament. Let's have a 17 tournament. New Zealand, Australia, the United States. No. I don't know. Let's figure it out. Let's do like a Pacific Challenge of some kind for the women, where Canada, U.S., strongest South American team. I don't know if there's a strong South American team, to be honest, but let's say strongest South American team. And then let's make it an 8-team tournament. So Canada, U.S., strongest South American team. Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Japan, and then the islands, So if you do maybe like a 9-team tournament, good enough. Just play good. Why not? You play that tournament throughout the entire year, and that would give you 8 tests, guaranteed. Done. Round robin. Let's do it, because that's what we should do. That's what we should do, because that's what if we want to win the thing, we have to play as many matches as the champions. The champions played 8 in the World Cup year. The runner-up played 12 matches. Holy heck, man. That's a lot. So, made a lot of inroads, made a lot of progress with the women's game this World Cup. It's on the union, and it's on each union's members to hold their union account. It's on the union to provide the resources for the development of the women's game. It's on the union's members, men and women, to hold them accountable. So if we end up with no extra money in the United States going towards the women next year, it's time to replace some people, because there's a lack of monetization of relationships to find that funding. So, I threw my money in the sport, of the women's game, because, we're out there begging for it. So, yeah. So, the group of women we have, minus, I think, the women that will retire, who are like I think there's like 4 of them this is like their 3rd World Cup. I think they might pull out. I don't know. If they don't, then that's fine. I don't care. It's like they're very strong players as is. But I think we'll bring in some new blood again, because that's just the way it is. That's just the way cycles work in a mostly amateur game. But I think the core group of players we have, like these 28 women, provided the union gets them the resources, we can win the next one. But if we don't play more than 3 matches, I think 4th place is like 4th or 3rd place is the peak, because you just don't spend enough time together playing rugby. So let's talk some of the players. Montserrat Amadi, fullback, amazing player for France. Romain Ménager for France, young, crazy flanker. Wow. Kelly Brazier, inside center, for the Black Ferns. She's a stone cold killer. Wild, great player. Portia Woodman. Man, if England had kept the ball out of her hands, I think they would have won. But the moment Portia Woman gets the ball in her hands once, it goes back to her hands a lot, and she just gains meters. She's an amazing wing. Like she can hit and she can score from 100 meters out. That's Celicia Winiata, crazy player. Sarah Hunter, 8. Normally, 8 men as captains are interesting because I want my 8 men to just be like this, like crazy hunter, like her last name is, but crazy player. Emily Scarrett, Danielle Waterman, Sarah Byrne, Amy Cocaine. Oof. Amazing. Gail Mignot, the hooker for France. Crazy player. I look at the list and the dream team. Jordan Gray, our 8-man, the United States. She is ridiculous. Like another. Alev Kelter, my favorite Eagle. Another ridiculous player. You saw the stars of the women's game on the greatest stage, and it was awesome. It was awesome to see. So, like I said, it's on us to hold the union accountable. The next job is to have a better format for the Women's Rugby World Cup. And on the United States side, if we don't get the Women's Rugby World Cup, we need to make sure our women are best prepared. So that means not having fundraisers to just barely limp them in to the Women's Rugby World Cup. That means securing the sponsorship that can fully fund the program, so we're not worried about that fundraiser, so that our fundraisers can go towards development of the game in the long term. So that's where I'm at on philanthropy. But format, days off, rehab, preparation before the World Cup. 4 games isn't going to cut it in the United States for the United States. When the Black Ferns, the Canadians, the French are playing 8. The English are playing 12. We're going to peak very early, whereas they will have already peaked and sustained a higher level of play because they will have played more together. So that's my opinion. Congratulations to Pete Steinberg for 6 great years leading the women's program. It's going to be hard to replace you. Good luck with your family, and enjoy that grand coach life, because that's where you're going. People are gonna ask you about advice for everything, and it's just gonna be like, wow. You're gonna be able to look at what you built this last World Cup, and provided the people that are in charge do the right things, you're gonna see the foundation that you built, the foundation for a World Cup champion in the next cycle. That's what I think. Because the coaching job he did against the Ferns and the French, showed, I think, everything. That was so. That's me. I'm the Strobro on Twitter. Aaron Castro, if you haven't met me before, just check it out. I think the United States we're supposed to play. The next national side match is the Eagles Selects down in Uruguay on the 8th of October. We're still waiting on who the coach is. So I'll get that information out to you as soon as I get it. Have a great day.